The scent of grilled burgers and my mom's famous potato salad filled the warm afternoon air. It was a perfect day for a family cookout, and for the first time in months, I felt a bubble of genuine excitement. I'd been holding this news close, protecting it, but surrounded by my parents, aunts, and cousins, it felt like the right moment. I took a small breath. I finally decided, I announced, my voice cutting through the chatter. I'm launching my own business. A proud smile touched my lips. For a second, there was a supportive murmur. Then my older brother, Mark, let out a loud, sharp laugh that silenced everyone. You? A business, he said, shaking his head with a condescending smirk. Emily, come on. You're the lazy one. You barely kept a job at the coffee shop. Stop embarrassing yourself. The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. I felt my face flush hot, my hands beginning to shake at my sides. The bubble of excitement popped, replaced by a familiar, crushing humiliation. I couldn't even look at my family. I muttered an excuse and left the party early, the sound of Mark's laughter echoing in my ears. I replayed the moment in my head all evening, curled up on my sofa. Each time, the sting felt fresh. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a lifetime of labels from Mark. Forgetful Emily, he'd call me when I misplaced my keys. Scatterbrained, he'd say about my ever-changing college majors. Unambitious, he declared when I took a job I loved that didn't pay much. Our mom always excused him. Oh, that's just Mark teasing, she'd say, brushing it off. I'd spent years doing the same, avoiding conflict, letting his words roll off me. But tonight, something was different. The humiliation didn't just hurt, it ignited a fire. As I stared at the dark ceiling, a resolve solidified inside me, hard and unyielding. The tears dried up, replaced by a cold clarity. He thought I was lazy? He thought I would fail? I whispered the vow into the quiet room, you will eat those words, Mark. Every single one. What no one knew, not even Mark with all his opinions, was that I had been quietly building a dream. For over a year, I'd been researching, planning, and studying the world of property renovation. I saw potential in forgotten buildings, a vision no one else seemed to share. But his constant criticism had planted seeds of doubt, making me question everything. Now, that doubt was gone, burned away by his public humiliation. That fire became my fuel. The next morning, I made a call I'd been too nervous to make before. I called Linda, a retired architect I'd met at a community workshop. I laid out my plans for her, my voice steadier than I felt. She listened intently. You have something real here, Emily, she said after a long pause. Her belief was a lifeline. The vision is solid, but a project like this, you'll need funding. It was the first real step. Linda's words proved true immediately. The following weeks were a parade of closed doors. Bank managers in stiff suits looked over my proposals and politely shook their heads. Private investors asked for financial projections I couldn't yet provide. Each rejection was a blow, but I refused to let it stop me. I refined my pitch, perfected my business plan, and kept knocking. Finally, I walked into a small, local credit union that focused on community development. The manager, a woman named Brenda, listened with genuine interest. She saw past my thin file and looked at my passion and research. A week later, my phone rang. It was Brenda. The board was impressed, Emily, she said. We're approving your application for a pilot project loan. I sank into a chair, the weight of the world lifting from my shoulders. With the loan secured, I did it. I bought my first property, a tired, run-down duplex on the edge of town. It needed love, new plumbing, and a complete aesthetic overhaul. When my family found out, their reactions were mixed, but Mark's was predictable. Our family group chat lit up with his message, Emily's renovating a building? She can't even hang a picture straight. This should be entertaining. I didn't respond. Instead, I dove in headfirst. I spent every day at that duplex, learning how to patch drywall, install flooring, and tile a bathroom. I was covered in dust and paint, but I was happier than I'd ever been. The project was my entire world. Then, during a routine city inspection, the official's face grew serious. He pointed to the foundation. "You've got some major structural issues here," he said, frowning. My dream project was suddenly at risk of being condemned. The inspection report was a disaster. The foundation repairs would cost more than my entire initial loan. I was devastated. At a tense family dinner, Mark couldn't resist. "Heard your money pit is falling apart," he said, scooping mashed potatoes onto his plate. "Maybe you should just cut your losses." I felt the familiar urge to shrink away, to agree with him. I almost broke. But later, at the hardware store, I was venting my frustrations to a clerk about the cost of steel beams. A man in a contractor's vest overheard me. "Which property on Oak Street?" he asked. I told him. He nodded thoughtfully. "I've been wanting to get into more historic restorations," he said. "I'll do the foundation work at cost for you, if you let me use the finished project in my portfolio." It was a miracle. With the contractor's help, the duplex was transformed. The once dingy building now stood fresh and modern, with a charming porch and a new roof. We listed it for rent and it was snapped up in less than a week by a lovely young family. The profit from that first success was more than I had ever saved in my life. For the first time, a new thought took root: Mark was wrong about me. My vision had value. My hard work had paid off. As I was depositing the checks, my phone buzzed. It was a real estate agent I knew. "Emily," she said, her voice excited. "There's a distressed commercial property downtown coming up for auction. It's a mess, but I immediately thought of you." I met the agent at the property, a 3-story brick building that had been abandoned for a decade. Boards covered the windows, and graffiti marred the walls. But as I stepped inside, the high, vaulted ceilings and large windows spoke to me. I didn't see decay, I saw potential. I imagined a bright, open space for local entrepreneurs, artists, small tech startups, a cozy cafe on the ground floor. It was massive, expensive, and on paper, a completely impossible risk. That evening, I showed the pictures to Linda. She studied them with a critical eye, then looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. "This is it, Emily," she said, her voice firm. "If you can pull this off, it won't just be a building. It'll put your name on the map." Buoyed by Linda's belief, I made the mistake of mentioning the new project at a Sunday lunch. Mark burst out laughing before I'd even finished my sentence. "You're delusional," he said, not even trying to be kind. "That old wreck? You'll bankrupt yourself." My mother, looking worried, patted my hand. "Honey, maybe start smaller. We don't want you to embarrass the family again." The word again felt like a slap. I looked at their doubtful faces, my determination hardening into something cold and strong. "I'm doing it anyway," I said, my voice quiet but clear. Mark just sneered, repeating the old, tired label like a weapon. "You will always be the lazy one." As I walked out of their house, I made a silent, firm decision. This building wouldn't just be a project. It would officially carry my name for everyone to see. The hunt for funding was a war of attrition. I spent every day writing grant applications for small business development and community revitalization funds. I faced countless setbacks, applications rejected on technicalities, programs that were suddenly defunded. But I also celebrated small wins. A local business association offered a small grant, and a green energy initiative approved funds for solar panels. My resilience was being forged in fire. I learned to navigate bureaucracy and advocate for myself with a confidence I never knew I possessed. After months of relentless work, I checked my email one morning to find 3 separate messages. I held my breath as I opened each one. They were all approvals. 3 different grants, all coming through at once. The war was far from over, but I had just won a major battle. With funding secured, the real work began. The building was a disaster zone. We found black mold in the walls, a foot of stagnant water in the basement, and evidence of vandalism throughout. It was overwhelming. 2 crew members quit in the first week, calling it a lost cause. A critical piece of equipment broke down, delaying us for days. A city inspector nearly red-tagged the site for a code violation I hadn't known about. The weight of the project threatened to crush me. During the worst of it, while clearing out the flooded basement, my boot hit something solid under the muck. I bent down and pulled out a rusted metal tube. Inside, protected by wax paper, were the original architectural blueprints for the building, revealing intricate historic details everyone had forgotten. The blueprints were a revelation. They showed beautiful arched windows that had been boarded up and a stunning skylight in the main atrium that was hidden behind a dropped ceiling. I immediately took them to the city's Historical Preservation Society. They were thrilled. The discovery changed everything. The city council, impressed with my plan to restore rather than just rebuild, granted me significant tax incentives and fast-tracked my permits. My project was no longer just a risky venture, it was a celebrated piece of urban renewal. I used the momentum to hire a dedicated, skilled team who shared my vision. As we were framing the new atrium, my phone rang. It was a reporter from the local paper. "I heard about the blueprints and the restoration," she said. "I'd love to do a story on you and this project." The article came out on a Sunday, with the headline, "The Woman Reviving Downtown, Emily Hartman's Historic Vision." It painted me as a passionate, savvy entrepreneur. My inbox flooded with messages from potential partners and well-wishers. Linda framed the article and hung it in her office. Mark, of course, never mentioned it. My parents said they were proud, but their tone was still laced with surprise. I didn't care. Reading that article, seeing my name in print associated with success, did something to me. The last of my self-doubt melted away. My confidence hardened into a quiet, unshakable power. I was no longer the person Mark said I was. At a meeting with a new supplier, he ended our conversation by saying, "A colleague of mine is very interested in your project. He's a wealthy investor looking for promising local ventures." Meanwhile, I started hearing whispers about Mark. His own business, a marketing firm he was so proud of, was hitting a rough patch. A major client had left, and he was having cash flow problems. The arrogant confidence he always carried began to crack. He called me one evening, his voice casual. "So, Em, how's that little project of yours going?" he asked, trying to sound indifferent. I kept my answers vague and professional, giving nothing away. A few days later, I was at my parents' house and overheard him on the phone in the next room. His voice was low and frustrated. "Don't worry about it, Mom," he said. "She'll fail. She always does." The words didn't hurt anymore. They just confirmed how deep his denial ran. My project, the Hartman Center, was nearing completion. It was breathtaking. The historic brick walls were exposed and cleaned, the arched windows let in floods of light, and the central atrium was a vibrant, open space for collaboration. The press was already asking for details about the grand opening. I worked with a metalworker to create the signage. The day it was installed, I stood across the street and watched as they bolted the large, elegant letters to the brick facade beside the main entrance, the Hartman Center. Just below, a sleek plaque was engraved, "Emily Hartman, founder and visionary." It was real. I took a deep breath and began sending out the formal invitations for the grand opening. I made sure one was sent to my entire family. The night before the grand opening, my phone buzzed relentlessly. It was Mark. He sounded stressed, his voice tight. "Emily, listen," he began, skipping pleasantries. "My business, it's not great. I'm restructuring." He cleared his throat. "I was thinking, since you're new to all this, you could bring me on as a consultant. I could help you avoid costly mistakes." The audacity of it stunned me. He wasn't offering to help, he was asking me to throw him a lifeline, to use my success to prop up his failure. The silence stretched between us. "No, Mark," I said, my voice calm and even. "I have everything under control." He snapped, his true colors flashing through. You're still the lazy one, he hissed. You just got lucky. The night of the grand opening, the street outside the Hartman Center was packed. Soft light glowed from the windows, and a crowd of guests, press, and local dignitaries mingled under strings of lights. I arrived in a simple, powerful suit, feeling a calm I hadn't expected. Then I saw my family arrive. My parents looked stunned, taking in the beautiful building. But it was Mark's reaction I watched. He froze on the sidewalk, his eyes locked on the building's facade. His face, usually so smug, drained of all color as he read the name, the Hartman Center. He looked from the sign to me, his jaw slack with disbelief. Family members whispered and pointed, their shock palpable. As I greeted guests, Mark suddenly appeared at my elbow, his voice a low, urgent whisper. Emily, we need to talk. Now. I led him to a quiet corner inside the bustling atrium. The confident mask he always wore was gone, replaced by a raw panic. My business is collapsing, he confessed, his words tumbling out. I'm going to lose everything, the office, the car, everything. He begged me, his voice desperate. You have to help me. Just a loan to get me back on my feet. Or let me move my company in here as a tenant, at a discount. I watched him, this brother who had spent a lifetime building me up only to tear me down. And I noticed it, clear as day, even in his desperation, he couldn't bring himself to say the words I was wrong. I looked him straight in the eye, my voice steady. I built all of this, I said, gesturing around us, without your support, while you were telling me I would fail. Why would I now fund the very person who tried to break me? Our mother had overheard everything. She rushed over, her face a mask of disapproval. Emily, that's enough, she scolded, putting a protective arm around Mark. He's your brother. You're being cruel. Can't you see he's hurting? The old pattern, the one where I was always expected to be the bigger person, to smooth things over, surged between us. But this time I didn't yield. I stood my ground, my voice firm but not raised. Cruel? I repeated. He has publicly humiliated me for years. He called me lazy and delusional for having a dream. Where was your defense for me then? As I spoke, other family members, my aunt, a few cousins, drifted closer. To my astonishment, they began nodding in agreement. She's right, Carol, my aunt said softly to my mom. Mark has been awful to her. She doesn't owe him anything. Just then, Arthur, the wealthy investor who had believed in my project, stepped onto the small stage we'd set up. He tapped the microphone and began praising my vision and tenacity. He then invited me up to say a few words. The crowd turned to me, their faces encouraging. I shared a short, heartfelt speech about persistence, about believing in your own worth when no one else does, and about rebuilding your life from the ground up. When I finished, the atrium erupted in warm, genuine applause. I saw Mark watching from the back of the crowd, his shoulders slumped, finally and fully defeated. As I stepped down from the stage, the mayor himself approached me, hand extended. Emily, that was inspiring, he said. The city is launching a new downtown redevelopment initiative. I'd like you to be our lead consultant. In the weeks that followed, Mark's business officially collapsed. His clients left, his staff found new jobs, and his office space was repossessed. The fallout was absolute. My mother, feeling sorry for him, constantly pushed him to apologize properly. He stubbornly refused, his pride still too large, even in ruin. One afternoon, my property manager brought me a stack of new tenant applications for the remaining studio spaces. I flipped through them absently until one particular form made me stop cold. It was an application from Mark's now-defunct company. He had submitted it without telling me, without even asking, hoping perhaps to slip through the cracks. The sheer entitlement of it took my breath away. I drove to his temporary apartment, the application in my hand. He answered the door, looking tired and disheveled. I held up the form. Care to explain this? I asked. He had the decency to look ashamed for a second, but then his face twisted with anger. You have all the space, he exploded, his voice shaking. You have everything. Success just fell into your lap. You stole it. Stole what, Mark? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. What did I steal? It should have been me, he yelled, and in that raw outburst, I finally saw him for what he truly was, a small, insecure, and deeply jealous man. The shadow I'd lived under my whole life vanished. I looked at him, no longer angry, just resolved. You will never, I said slowly and clearly, set foot in my building as anything other than a guest. In the quiet days that followed, a familiar guilt tried to creep in. Years of conditioning whispered that I was being a bad sister, that I was mean and unforgiving. I confessed this to Linda over tea. She listened patiently, then fixed me with her sharp, kind eyes. Emily, protect your peace, she said firmly. He didn't build you. He broke you. And you, all on your own, rebuilt yourself into this. She gestured around her, as if my success surrounded us. You don't owe anyone a piece of the person you became without them. Her words were the final key. I released the guilt, not all at once, but like letting go of a breath I'd been holding for years. A few days later, my phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was quiet. Can we meet? Just one last time. We met at a neutral park bench. He looked different, the arrogance was completely gone, leaving behind a man who seemed simply tired and sad. This time, there was no manipulation, no hidden agenda. I'm sorry, Emily, he said, and for the first time it was real. I was wrong. About everything. I called you lazy because your ambition was different from mine. I mocked you because I was terrified that you might actually succeed where I was failing. He admitted he had resented the very qualities he lacked, my perseverance, my heart, my ability to start over. I listened, and I forgave him in that moment. Not for him, but for me. So I could finally walk away from the weight of his judgment and be truly free. The closure was for me. Months later, the Hartman Center was a thriving hub. New businesses were growing within its walls, supported by a community I had built. I led the city's redevelopment project, my name now synonymous with vision and integrity. I never funded Mark. I never saved his business. But I had offered him compassion at the end, and in doing so, I proved I was never the lazy or weak one he claimed. My success stood in brick and glass and community spirit, a permanent monument towering over every doubt I had ever harbored. One evening, I stood on the building's rooftop garden, watching the sunset paint the sky. My name, Hartman, glowed softly on the facade below. This wasn't revenge through destruction. It was revenge through becoming. I had become everything they said I couldn't, and the victory, earned entirely on my own terms, was more satisfying than I ever could have imagined.